very nice introduction. I am from the International Press Institute, and I have the pleasure of running this Investigative Journalism for Europe program. And I would like to just tell you a little bit about it now, because I think it offers an interesting model that I hope may be useful in other parts of the world, but also in Europe. And as you'll see, it embraces people from all over the world. So I'll just spend a couple of minutes telling you about it and seeing what we can learn. Since this is a disinformation summit, let's look at it through the lens of disinformation. And the problem, of course, is that the disinformation industry, as it were, has outpaced the journalism industry, which I don't need to tell you is in dire crisis, all sorts of financial and sustainability issues. Whereas in the past, we might have been dealing with random fake instances of fact, fake news and, bad facts, that kind of thing. Now we're dealing with entirely organized disinformation ecosystems, which are often cross-border in nature. So that requires a whole different level of response. And unfortunately, it's a response that the industry, our sector, is often just not up to the job of doing. So this mismatch between the scale of the modern disinformation machine and our ability as journalists to report it is kind of at the crux of what I'm discussing here. So the IJ4EU program, the Investigative Journalism for Europe program, it doesn't just apply to disinformation, but I think we do have a lot of investigations into disinformation. So I think it's relevant. And this is an attempt to try to deal with that huge gulf between the need and the what's actually possible. So it's been going since 2018. Basically, it is a way to pool public taxpayer money and philanthropic money and allocate it or direct it to the best investigative journalism into public interest stories, including disinformation stories out there, without any fear of editorial independence. Most of the money comes from the European Commission, about 90% of it. And there's also support from various private foundations like the Odessian Foundation or the Fritt Ord Foundation in Norway. And it's run by IPI and our partners in the IJ4EU consortium. That's the European Journalism Centre and the European Centre for Press and Media Freedom. And I should say that we act as a kind of neutral intermediary to let this funding flow. We don't make any of the funding decisions. Independent juries of experts make all those funding decisions. So we basically offer two major grant schemes. This funding round, and this year and next year, we have 1.6 million in euros in grants to give away. The one scheme is called the Investigation Support Scheme. It quite large grants, up to 50,000 euros, and that's for fairly large collaborations, teams of cross-border journalists collaborating. And then there's a slightly smaller grant scheme for freelancers, and that comes with additional layers of bespoke support, such as training, mentoring, access to experts, that kind of stuff. So we've just closed our first round of this current this current funding cycle, and the next one, if you're interested, will be opening in December. So that gives you plenty of time to think about any investigations you'd like to propose. Here are just a few numbers about the program from the last funding round, which spanned 2024 and 2025. We had a bit more money then, 2.13 million euros in grants, and that allowed 75 investigations with hundreds of journalists, 68 countries involved, 38 different languages, and hundreds of publications were generated with this money. So that's been really, really successful, I think, and we're very excited to be going another 2 years. Now, I mentioned the editorial independence factor, and this is absolutely, sacrosanct for us. And in fact, a recent academic article in Journalism Practice called the IJ4EU model a gold standard for journalism funding. And I quite like this quote. It's quite gratifying. Donor funding has long been accused of breeding volatility, inviting mission drift or exerting subtle editorial pressures. So basically influencing the editorial output. But the IJ4EU model offers a refreshing counter-narrative. A journalist-led, so it was made by journalists for journalists, arm's-length framework that insulates editorial processes from funder interference while actively encouraging transnational collaboration. And that's really what we're trying to do. Now, if you're interested in taking part, a small note on geographical eligibility. Because this is European Commission money from the European Commission's Creative Europe program, it stands to reason that participants need to be based in Europe, in this case, in at least 2 of these blue countries, which are Creative Europe countries. But if you are based further afield, anywhere in the world, in fact, you can also take part, because once the initial eligibility criteria is satisfied, in other words, if you have a team of, let's say, journalists in Spain and Italy, and you want to have another journalist in Argentina or in Myanmar or wherever, that's absolutely fine. And about half of IJ4EU supported projects do have teams that go outside of Europe. The key point is you need cross-border teams. So it's collaboration between newsrooms and journalists, freelancers, and so on. So we have all kinds of different topics, but obviously we've had a lot of disinformation investigations. If you're interested in seeing these, you can go onto the IJ4EU site and look at the projects section. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the detail. I brought 3 out as examples. I won't tell you about these. You can go and look at them yourself. There are many more as well. What they all have in common is that they're cross-border, and they're looking at disinformation from a very systemic point of view and using collaboration to do so. Collaboration is the thing that they all have in common. And it's often because to do justice to these stories, you need to combine so many different expertise and skill sets and disciplines, whether it's open source intelligence or local reporting or visual forensics. And often a single journalist or even a single newsroom won't have those skills, in-house to hand. So that's why collaboration is absolutely essential. That, of course, costs money and takes time, and that's why we provide this support. Now, of course, this kind of work comes with problems and risks, everything from legal risks to physical dangers, mental issues. Burnout's a big one we're seeing in our teams. This is very difficult work, very taxing, time-consuming, stressful. So we tried to provide, in addition to the money, a whole sort of ecosystem of support that helps people deal with these risks. So we have training, mentoring, networking opportunities, pay a lot of attention to digital security, dealing with online harassment, and in particular legal support. So if you get sued for defamation, say, or you're handed a slap, we have some funds that can help you out with that. So that's really quite useful. And in conclusion, I would say that democracy doesn't just depend on media freedom, but we need to be able to have the resources and the time and the capacity as journalists to do what journalism has always done, which is to establish a shared reality. And the fracturing of that shared reality is what has led to so many problems in our world today. So thank you very much for that. If you're interested in finding out more, go to ij4eu.net or feel free to get in touch with me at my email here. So thank you very much.